When the curtain rises, we find ourselves in the foggiest, richest, yet most wretched city in history, Victorian London. The calendar reads 1888. While the West End reigned under the immense power of Queen Victoria's Second British Empire and the unprecedented splendor brought about by the Industrial Revolution, a completely different world lay in the narrow, damp streets of Whitechapel in the East End. A hellish place cut off from civilization, where squalor, poverty, alcoholism, and despair abounded. This area was, on the one hand, a ghetto created by the perverse wave of immigration unleashed by industrial growth. On the other, a chaos so deepening that even the police force was powerless to control it, a moral decay. But in the autumn of that year, such darkness descended upon this misery that neither the mightiest empire in history nor the presence of hundreds of police officers could dispel it, because that shadow, whose identity was never solved, whose murders became the pinnacle of horror, would create the greatest legend in the history of criminology: Jack the Ripper. This isn't just the story of the brutal murders of 5 women, it's the story of a scalpel piercing the hypocrisy of Victorian society, the ingenious rise of a psychopath, and how mass fear can build an empire of media and social chaos. Let's embark on a dark, scholarly journey into that bloody autumn that paralyzed London, the identity of Jack the Ripper, and Victorian London's empire of fear. But before we get to the video, the development of our channel and the creation of more great content depend on the support of our valued viewers. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Enjoy. The Victorian age was the golden age of technology, medicine, and science. However, the Whitechapel district of East London was a forgotten backyard, deprived of all the benefits of this progress. It was a crowded, unhealthy labyrinth, home to hundreds of thousands of impoverished workers, Jewish immigrants from Ireland and Eastern Europe, and women forced to sell their bodies to survive. Whitechapel's houses, attics, and narrow streets were hotbeds of dampness, dirt, and tuberculosis. Unemployment, extreme poverty, and alcoholism, especially cheap gin, were the locals' escape and downfall mechanisms. The vast majority of women in the area were prostitutes, known at the time as low women, who occupied the lowest rung of the social hierarchy. Their lives were virtually invisible to society, and even their deaths, until Jack entered the picture, were mere statistics. The Metropolitan Police, the police force of the time, was completely inadequate to control such a dense and chaotic area. Street lighting was poor, patrols were infrequent, and technological advancements like telephones and rapid transit were not as advanced as they are today. For the killer, Whitechapel was not only a hunting ground but also a perfect hideout from which to conceal murders and quickly disappear. Jack exploited this social and security vacuum with a hunter's instinct. The social exclusion of his victims laid the sociological foundation for the months-long unsolved murders. The few months between August 1888 and November 1888 became known as the Bloody Autumn, and London's centuries-old history had never witnessed such a horrific, serial, and unsolved crime wave. While the police, with their methods of investigating the murders and their inadequate technology, lagged behind the killer, Jack effectively transformed his murders into a signature. Historians and criminologists focus on 5 canonical victims who have been definitively attributed to Jack the Ripper. A common thread among the murders was the slitting of their throats, followed by gruesome and elaborate incisions on their abdomens. The first official victim of the murders was Mary Ann Nichols on August 31, 1888. The level of brutality exceeded anything previously seen in Whitechapel. The murder scene served as a testing ground for Jack's future actions. The second murder victim was Annie Chapman on September 8, 1888. This murder marked the first time Jack demonstrated his surgical expertise. Part of Chapman's uterine organs had been removed. This created suspicions that the killer was not only a brutal attacker but also a cold-blooded individual with a thorough understanding of human anatomy. On September 30, 1888, Jack taunted the police by targeting 2 different women, only a few hundred meters apart, on the same night. Stride's murder was likely interrupted by the approach of a witness. However, in Eddowes' case, the killer removed a kidney and brutally mutilated her face. This demonstrated the extent of Jack's courage and planning. The murder of Mary Jane Kelly on November 9, 1888 was the culmination of Bloody Autumn and the most horrific. Kelly was found in a hotel room, and the murder was more like a butchery exhibition than a murder. This time, in a closed space and without any time constraints, Jack had dismembered his victim's body and placed the organs around the room. This final murder most clearly demonstrated the extent of the killer's audacity and insanity. The collective impact of this series of murders was the failure of the London police. The frequency and brutality of the murders and the killer's ability to flee the scene without leaving a trace exposed the inadequacy of the police force of the time. Public trust in the state was shaken and fear permeated every street. The most significant characteristic that distinguished Jack the Ripper from other serial killers in history was his ability to create his own legend. Beyond being a murderer, Jack was an expert in psychological warfare. He not only created terror with his murders, but also reinforced it with his signature and messages. The letters sent to the police and newspaper editors completely changed the course of events. The Dear Boss letter marked the first time the killer used the name Jack the Ripper. The letter mockingly challenged the police and threatened more murders. The letter's publication in the media instantly transformed the killer's name and terror into a global phenomenon. This was one of the first significant cases of a killer directly communicating with the public. While the Saucy Jack postcard demonstrated Jack's audacity, the From Hell letter and the kidney were the most terrifying and concrete evidence of these letters. Alongside the letter was half of a human kidney believed to belong to Catherine Eddowes. In the letter, the killer claimed to have fried and eaten the other half of the kidney. This letter demonstrated that the killer's psychological state and brutality knew no bounds. The British press of the time, especially the low-volume newspapers, exploited these murders with great gusto. Headlines were based on fear and sensationalism. Newspapers exaggerated even the smallest details about the murders daily, transforming Jack the Ripper into a virtual supervillain. This media hysteria on the one hand completely eroded public trust in the police and on the other served as the most significant catalyst for immortalizing the Jack legend. Jack the Ripper remains a subject of study in criminology history because of the high level of knowledge behind his murders. The organs removed from the victims and the nature of the cuts raised strong suspicions that the killer was either a surgeon, a butcher, or a medical student. The surgical precision and speed with which the murders were carried out suggested that Jack did not spend hours working in dark corners, but rather completed the murders as an operation. Scientific methods at the time were extremely primitive. Fingerprint analysis wasn't yet a standard method, and DNA analysis was a futuristic concept. Police were contaminating murder scenes with hundreds of people unable to properly collect evidence. Furthermore, the conflict of jurisdiction and communication between the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police, which covers the Whitechapel district, proved to be one of the biggest setbacks in the investigation. Both agencies refused to share information with each other, paralyzing efforts to track down the killer's escape routes. Despite hunting in dark and squalid streets, Jack the Ripper was likely a low-profile, perhaps well-educated individual who lived a respectable life during the day due to the attention his victims generated. This duality demonstrated his psychological depth. The speed with which he committed the murders and then disappeared proved that he was a local who knew every corner of the area. Jack was a hunter hidden in the darkest corners of society, yet possessed the potential to emerge from the highest echelons of society. Jack the Ripper stopped the murders just as suddenly and without a trace. This sudden disappearance transformed the horror it created into a mystery and launched the obsession known as Ripperology, the obsession with investigating and solving murders. Even today, hundreds of books, articles, and films attempt to unravel this mystery. The labyrinth of identities is filled with dozens of suspects and sensational conspiracy theories. The first of these suspects, lawyer Montague John Druitt, was considered a serious suspect by the police. This lawyer, who committed suicide shortly after the murders stopped, possessed both the intelligence and the social standing to commit the murders. However, no definitive evidence has been found. The second suspect, Polish barber Aaron Kosminski, is one of the strongest scientific candidates today. DNA samples taken from one of the victim's shawl have been suggested to point to Kosminski. Kosminski was an immigrant who had been incarcerated in a mental institution and had a hatred of women. The renowned painter Walter Sickert was known for his obsession with murders. His depictions of crime scenes and his writings, resembling Jack's letters, propelled him to the center of conspiracy theories. This theory, seen as a dark fusion of art and crime, has garnered considerable attention. Finally, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence, stands out as the most fantastical and sensational of the suspects. According to this theory, the prince lost his mind due to syphilis and committed the murders. This was covered up by the state because it would have been a great embarrassment to the British monarchy. The fact that Jack the Ripper's identity has never been solved has transformed him into a symbol rather than a murderer. Jack embodied the repressed sexuality of the Victorian age, social class inequality, and the anonymity brought on by modernization. He cut through not only the squalor of Whitechapel, but the hidden and dark underbelly of all of London. His murders have gone down in history as the beginning of the modern serial killer phenomenon, the pinnacle of newspaper journalism, and the most poignant proof of the helplessness of criminology. Jack the Ripper appeared suddenly, spread terror, and vanished into the mist without a trace. His murders remain unsolved, but the legacy of fear he created remains vivid even after more than a century. He was a monster legend that haunted not only Whitechapel, but the entire modern world. His murders were a warning written with the tip of a scalpel. The deepest darkness in human nature can lurk in the shadows of even the most civilized societies, and sometimes the greatest mysteries manage to remain unsolved. This is the video we prepared about Jack the Ripper, who left his mark on Victorian England and is one of the greatest mysteries in the history of criminology. We hope you enjoyed our video. Your support for our channel is crucial for more great content. Please like the video and don't forget to subscribe. Stay well and see you in the next video.